A very good afternoon, one and all. I hope you all are geared up to take the 3 days long plunge into the football Mahamanthan during the third edition of the Global Soccer Conclave for the next 3 days. We are extremely happy to introduce our title sponsors, Tech Mahindra, the tech supergiant, and Amazon Web Series, the leading cloud computing solution provider. The government of Odisha powers the Conclave initiative through their vision and mission for reshaping Indian sports holistically. The conclave is also empowered by the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce, the largest and oldest chamber of India supporting sports, especially football. We also welcome Sports Next as our powered by partner, the Sports EdTech platform, which is bringing quality international education with the best industry integration experiences, and Sportscom Industry Confederation, the emerging sports specific vertical under the Confederation of Indian Industries. We are also happy to announce that Johan Cruyff Institute, European Business and Technology Center, Sports Tech X, and Pillai FIFA CIES Sports Management as our knowledge partners. And Netron Sports Technologies, First Beat Technologies, Exilio GPXE, Nutra Supplements, Gallant Sports and Intra, Debatable, Selville One Group, News 9 Live, Hotel Yogi Executive as various associate sponsors. Without taking much time, we will directly dive into today's session. I now hand over to Ricardo Balbeira, the sports management expert from Portugal and international relations head for the Portuguese Football Coaches Association and head of online education of University Europea as moderator of our first session, Talent Identification and Scouting, Unlock the Potential. Over to you, Ricardo. The stage is yours. Please introduce the panelists for the session and get started.
Thank you very much, Subi, for the presentation. Very glad to be here with this high-level panelists of this specific panel. So as you said, we'll be discussing Talent ID. So we will try to understand what are the best practices in Talent ID and the impact of the new technology and how is it impact this process of Talent ID and scouting. So we are here, as I said, with three top specialists in this specific area. We are here with Mr. José Chieda. He's the former head of scouting at Sporting Club of Portugal. He successfully worked for 20 consecutive seasons in the Premier League as a lead scout. José is a talent identification specialist who is well versed with multi-level scouting and data management with top-level competitive contexts. Also, Mr. Hans van der Helst is currently the director of football at Double Pass. Hans has more than 25 years of experience as a coach, academy director, and sporting director in Belgium. He has worked for clubs and federations in Europe, North and South America, Asia, and Africa. And finally, Mr. Richard Allen is a talent identification specialist, coach, and a football consultant who is currently working as the senior football executive and technical advisor at Yokohama FC. And also he was the former head of recruitment at Tottenham Hotspur. So guys, for me, it's a great pleasure to be with such high-level panelists on this discussion panel. I would like to start with Richard. And as you know, the main subject of this panel is about Talent ID and how things has been changing during the last few years. And of course, this is a very broad question, but could you tell me, Richard, nowadays, what are the best practices when creating a talent identification and scouting plan? Are they very different from the past? What has changed in the last few years, Richard? Can you go a bit, but without going very further, because we will discuss subject by subject, Richard, please?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, thanks, Ricardo. Yeah, I mean, things have changed from when I first started in terms of knowledge, the way that we get information. But I think some things haven't changed. And I feel the best processes or the best situations I've been involved in is where clubs have a really clear understanding of their cultures and values. And then, you know, from that, what their philosophy is, their playing philosophy, their coaching philosophy, and everything drops out of that. So whether it's the way that we play, the way that we coach, who our head coach is, and then of course who the players are that we want to recruit for that particular style of football. And then I think there are a range of things that you have to do. Clearly, having KPIs of your player profiles. I'm always a little bit concerned about player profiles in terms of, we all know that there are different types of central defenders. And I thought I'd really cracked it when I told my scouts to go and find defenders that look like Rio Ferdinand. I want them to play the same way, look the same way, the same body shape. And I thought that was, really clear. Well, fantastic. And then somebody put their hand up and said, well, what happens if we find Vidic? What do we do then? And then I realized, well, actually, yeah, there are some fundamental things that you might want within your setup, but yeah, we've got to be open-minded. And I think what's happened now, we create depth charts and we analyze where our weaknesses are and the gaps. What we have now, which we probably didn't have in the past, was that access to data and analytics. And I think the first stage where you have so many players, not at the younger end, because obviously there's limited amount of data and analytics on younger players, but certainly on older players, you've got so many players that you now have access to through the various systems. You're looking at players all over the world. How do you kind of narrow that down? And if you can input the kind of markers that you have, the KPIs that you have, the type of player that you have, I think that then leads to you being able to go out and do what we always did, that kind of live observation, looking at players, watching players, to kind of get together a long list. And then it's kind of that circular, going back to the analytics and data, more looking at kind of observations before you shortlist. And I think all those things help us to alleviate some of the issues that you might have around bias, because it's not that just, it's that art and science, subjective, objective way of doing things. And then it's how you actually get it over the line and who does that. I think in the old days, it might have been the same person who did the scouting, watched the players, and then decided if they were going to sign them and then did the deal. Now, I think there are different people within the club that might be part of that decision-making process. So I think that alignment is the key thing for me. And then using the tools that we now have to make that easier. And certainly that's the big difference for me.
Thank you, Richard. It was a great introduction of this subject. We're going to go deeper in those subjects that you touched now. But now I would like to ask Hans. Of course, we all know the answer of this question, but I believe that it's interesting to understand why not. But Hans, can talent identification be done seeing a player just on a single day, or is it a progressive process? Why is it not possible to detect talent or a talented player just watching once that player? And what has changed in the last few years in this specific matter? Hans?
Yes. Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you for having me. Like Mr. Richard was saying before, yes, talent identification is a process. It's not a one-time shot like you were saying. It's a process, and there are a lot of different steps in it. We as Double Pass, we work more on talent development and on the talent identification from the academy, from the younger age groups. And when I reflect to that, yeah, there is a very important thing in talent identification: the difference between the performance and the potential. And what we see is that in a lot of countries, environments, when you talk about younger players, a lot of people look always at the performance at the right now, at what level are the players reaching now, and not taking in mind a lot of indicators of what the potential could be. And that's a difference with, I know it's the same thing within the first team environment. When you're recruiting, scouting and recruiting players for first team, of course, you look also to the potential. But when you look to younger players, we talk about the maturation, the relative age effect, the training age, things like that are really, really key. And of course, in some very developed countries and higher end clubs, all these things are in place, and people and specialists like here in the panel are there and are really experienced in that. We see that in a lot of countries, again, they look at the player at 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, who is now who has already the biological age, being 2 years older, who is from the beginning from the year, who is already 7 years, I say something, in an academy, compared with another player who's only 1 year there. Also the mental aspect about the growth mindset, the self-regulations, those are all factors, things to keep in mind to have a clear eye on talent identification. So that's a little bit the way for younger age groups, how we are looking to that, to keep those factors in mind, and to see, how you look to talent and which talent you want to recruit and which talent you want to give chances. So to answer your question, and I think you already gave the answer. Is it just a shot on a single day, or is it a process? Yeah, of course, I think everybody agrees that it's a process, and that as a club, as an environment, as a federation, or the stakeholder who is recruiting and looking into talent, they have first to be aware of what they are looking for. And like Richard was saying, on first team level, you have really specific player profiles, but the player profiles are only just player profiles. And then maybe on younger age groups, you make them more generic, what you are looking for, but still then there are exceptions. So it's not a single shot. It's a process taking a lot of factors, a lot of criteria in mind, in our opinion.
Okay, thank you very much, Hans. Let's try to get a bit more practical now with Jose. I'm aware that Jose has also a long experience with the youth department and working with the young players. And Jose, once you are doing a talent ID session on the ground, what are the core points? Hans already touched some of those, but what are the core points for evaluating the young player? And how important is to determine, as Hans said, the maturation stage of the player? Can you do that? When should you get more details about the maturation stage of the player? And what are the key points that you look when you are on the ground watching those youth players, Jose?
Good morning, Ricardo. Good morning to all of you, the attendees here, and my colleagues in the forum. You touched two interesting bases. The one is about evaluation, the process of evaluation, and the other about the timing of decision making. So it's two different aspects which also are connected. Okay. The thing is, to explain this, we have. So I have to go through my own process, because, like Hans was saying, it's about the process, and each and every one of us we have built our own process based on past experience, and the way we interact with the other people at the club, also about club culture, the vision, philosophy, etc. Okay, so maybe I can tell something about my own process. Well, right now there's a lot of pressure on talent market, for sure, because the new money coming to the industry, the investors, obviously only one club can be champion every season. So there is the other side of the business. It's about the financial aspect, and this has put a lot of pressure in the talent market, because now clubs are willing to find more talent or better talent at younger ages. So this is speeding up also the scouting and the recruitment process. It's about evaluation and about decision making. Everything now is a lot more pressure to actually make decisions and make the best possible decision. Okay. About the core points we're asking, well, first of all, it's about knowing what you're looking for. I mean, we have to be solid on relevant concepts and profiles with KPIs. My assessment, or the assessment, typically covers 4 dimensions: technical, physical, tactical, and mental. These 4 different aspects, 4 different traits, we have to make sure are well covered. Then the profiles, the KPIs, depend also on the context, because if we're working with a coaching staff, or a sports director, or a technical coordination, depending on the club, depending on these dynamics, This in the end, it's influence in the way the profiles are set. Okay, working for Sporting Lisbon is different from working for FC Porto. From my experience, before I went to Sporting, I spent 8 years at Porto, and 4 years before in Panathinaikos. All these clubs have different approaches to the market, the way they see the players, the way they get to the market, about your strategy, the profiles. Everything is different, also because of the culture, the pedigree, the history of success. Okay, so in the end, we have to adapt to what this is the context of the club we're working for. And then you get to the modern profiles, what we call the modern profiles. I mean, the profiles which then are more relevant to this present time, because one thing is look at football as a game 10 years ago. Another thing is look at football is played right now. And so when we are looking to the players right now, we have to evolve also in the way we assess them. These model profiles, usually they include obviously talent, the physical dimension, and decision making, because the football is being played now in a more is quicker, not too much space. So the players need to know the game at the early stage of the career. And this calls for different concepts. One, intelligence, made cognitive, motor, spatial, emotional. The talent, either it's natural or educated. And then, it arises all this, the coachability and development criteria, the way you look at the players, are they coachable, where's the potential? The physical, meaning biotype, biomechanics, speed and power. The anger, okay, it's about the desire, resilience, positive resilience, willingness to learn. This is very important. The body language, it's very important for us when we are looking at the player. The match performance, or at least how they perform in competitive contexts, including if you're like promoting a trial at the club, you have this, you organize these trials, you have to understand how they perform when it comes to high level of competition. And then decision making, football IQ is fundamental, like I told you before. And at the end, look at the global dimension. I mean, it's we're looking for outstanding players, the players who are different from all the others. And these are the ones who actually make all the process worse. Especially when you're a big club, you want not only the best ones, but those who are different from the others. There's a second factor here. It's very important in this process. It's about reading the maturity. I mean, it's like connecting the age and the potential, because there are players who are late bloomers. You have to identify these profiles, what they can bring and give to you right now or in the future. Okay, because right now in football, almost every division is coachable. Pretty much all of them are coachable, because the science and all the data, everything, it's helped a lot of football the way it's coached and played for the last 10 years, for sure. Another issue is reading the potential. It's very important. I mean, we have to understand when this player eventually will improve until he gets to fulfill his maximum potential. And then we have to place the player also in a context. We have to be able to benchmark the player. You have to include your own players, okay? It's not enough to looking at, other players from other clubs and, okay, you scout and you say, okay, this player is different from the others for your own process. You can see the forest or a reference, but it's quite important to actually to put the player in a context. Otherwise, it's just playing football manager. You have to understand and to be sure that we're adding value to the club when not only scouting, but recruiting the player. And then it's important to call up to the process, the coaching staff, and also management, because you need the coaching staff to provide you also feedback, because it's a learning process. We have to adjust the scouting and recruitment to the way they look at the players, to look at the way the game model, philosophy, etc. And also you need the management to set up some boundaries. Otherwise, we're playing football manager and need some boundaries like the budget, what type of level of players, level of clubs, level of the leagues we're looking for. And you need to call everything into your process, so you can improve the chances or making a better decision in the end. Okay. Also important to this is setting up an assertive reporting. The reporting has to be clear, quick and clear. Okay, and also to be able to manage the information in a very quick and assertive way. This is very important. There are a lot of now organization and scouting and technical tools to help you on the process. It's very relevant. And in the end, you have to try to build a trusting thinking tank, to work with not too many people at upper level, at the decision making, but with a few people, but people actually help you to see the forest and to actually help you to make the best possible decision. This is very important. This is my process. The process can vary. It's a result of it's many years, many experience, and almost is trial and error. But I think in the end, I try to cover these different dimensions.
Yeah, it is interaction of all of those subjects. I understand that. Richard, Jose already touched that point about what are the areas of evaluation of the players. He said that one of those is like the mental attitude. But in your opinion, Richard, do you feel that to evaluate the attitude and temperament of the young player is as important or more important than the technical, the tactical, and the physical assessment? What do you think about this? Is it changing also? Is it more important now than it was in the future, in the past? Sorry, Richard, what do you think about this subject?
Yeah, so Jose covered it, a lot of those kind of behaviors, characteristics. And I do believe that's the kind of difference between maybe good and great. We all know very talented players who don't quite get there. And it's probably that psychosocial stuff that is holding them back. Now, there's no question, you still have to be really good at football. You have to be strong technically. You have to have a fantastic game understanding, your physical attributes, or with younger players, at least have the potential to become expert in those areas. But is that level of elite play where you need to be a good decision maker, you need to be adaptable, you need to have resilience, and the coaches have that responsibility to try and build that in. And I think for me, when I'm looking at players, yes, we're trying to look at those areas, because I do think it could be something, because potential is a really hard thing to measure. But I think, if we can see some characteristics and behaviors that we think are potentially elite, then I think that's only a positive. What I would say, though, is it's a bit like, a player has some technical weaknesses. We shouldn't write that player off because they haven't got some of those things. So if they're not resilient, how do we build resilience, especially if we're looking at their young players? Some of it comes naturally. There's this whole kind of concept of trauma. Something that happens in their lives. Now, I'm not suggesting something has to have happened, but once they get into your program, those kind of speed bumps in the road that might actually give them that kind of opportunity to at least experience some of those setbacks will help them as they go further on. So yeah, I'm very keen to kind of understand the player and their behaviors. Again, how does it match with your culture and values, which I think is really important. And clubs will be different, so it's not a given, one club to another club. I think understanding your player's history is really important. Hans touched on, do we know their training age? Do we know their chronological age? All the things that we might need, their biological age. But, what's their background? Who are their parents? Do they come from a sporting background? Do they have siblings? There's a whole range of things that you want to put into the mix when you're trying to find out information about the player to make a decision. I think also when they get older and you're looking at more first team players, I've made many mistakes where just because a player is good within their own environment, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be good in your environment, that kind of cultural fit. How do you ensure that they will come into your club and be really good? Because we see so many players that move clubs and aren't successful for various reasons. When I worked in London, moving to London is a big thing. Even moving from another city in England is a big thing to London. Moving a player from the other side of the world or in the south of Europe, how do they come in? What do we do to help them to kind of integrate and understand what you're trying to do? And, this kind of concept of being able to take on board and information and be coachable and all those kind of things. I think is really, really important. But I do believe it's a red flag rather than necessarily we don't want you. I think you then have to determine what can be, improved and what is it's too late. There are some things, I suppose sports psychologists would say everything can be improved. But the problem is football is you've only got a short window of opportunity. So it's no good that you're my age and you suddenly worked it all out. It's too late. You've got to have worked it out when you're in your early 20s. And the final thing, which I found quite interesting, is trying to ascertain where players have got this kind of psychological stamina. If you're a young goalkeeper, it's really, really hard. And you probably have to wait a long, long time before you actually are successful. You don't get that many opportunities. And often goalkeepers will come through at 22, 23, 24. That's a long time to wait. So have they got that mentality, that psychological stamina to be able to get them through to the age where they might actually make their debut and make a career in football?
Good point, Richard. Thank you a lot. Going back to Jose, and Richard touched at this point that what is really changing in this talent ID process has to be with the data that we are now analyzing and producing. So for you, Jose, in elite professional model scouting, do you think that is key to use data on this process, and how is data helping the scouts to get better decisions, Jose?
Okay, this big data for me is like data is an expertise. Okay, it's key. Well, I don't think it's key. It's really a very good tool for different reasons. I think, well, first of all, eventually to describe is like the history of scouting. Because big data in the end is scouting 3.0. It's about the quantitative approach. Okay, it's about decoding the player. We started, 30 years ago or more with traditional scouting, this qualitative approach. It's also about see the player. Then we do the video libraries with the internet, with the Wirescout and Instat. We came up with the video scouting. It was about watching the player. So this big data brings, the third era, third stage of the scouting work. Well, I can give you an example about Sporting Lisbon. When I got to the club, there was no big data at all involved, nothing. There was the guys from the fitness with GPS, everything, because they were actually quite advanced in the overall sports, not only football, but big data in football was not so frequent. And it's always, we have to set up a department, big data department from scratch. There is nothing there at the club. I came from Porto. Porto had nothing. It's still almost is very not significant approach with the big data. But at Sporting, we needed to build some advantage, to bring some added value when compared to other clubs, big clubs like Porto and Benfica, who already had like these strongest squads and this history of being champions, whatever. So you set up this big data department, and we decided to have these three different interventions with the data. Okay, three different layers. First of all, we applied the first filter to the raw data. So we call the coaching staff, help us to build the profiles, the KPIs, so that when we understood what they were looking for. So we got the big data and we applied these filters. It's like a process of trial and error, but in the end, you have to do it. Okay. Secondly, you can use also the big data for benchmarking, because eventually when you get to shortlist with players, you are allowed with the big data to benchmark them. That's quite useful. It's interesting. We'll not make a final decision about the signing recruitment on it, but it's a good expertise, it's a good input also. And the third approach is trying to build a predictive model. So basically, it's about developing profiles from past contests. It's about learning what teams, what the profiles of the players or part of the team were winning or, getting to the targets we're looking for, like qualifying the Champions League, etc. And we're trying to use the big data to build these predictive models. And, okay, how would the big data improve our decision as scouts? Okay, first of all, the data allows us to identify trends and patterns. That's relevant for us when looking at the market, and you know what we're looking for from the profiles we're building. And then you also are able to bring the coaching step to the process, which is always a very healthy issue, because you're not playing football manager again. I mean, scouting and recruitment is not an end in itself. You need these people because they'll actually get the player, they'll coach the player, and will make a decision worthwhile of the whole process. And this is quite interesting, having a different space with the big data to actually call them to this process, okay? And of course, we are able to optimize our time, because the time you are not traveling around, going to the grounds, wasting your time and the resources and everything, when you have the big data, which eventually might work, like I told you, as a first filter. And also it allows you in the scouting department to optimize your geo strategy. It's important to allocate your resources in the constant way. And the big data is very important to identify the competition, the context, with more potential targets. That's very relevant for us.
Okay, thank you, Jose. I would like to I have a script, but and my next question would be for Richard. But I would like to ask Hans, how are you using data in the process of development talented young players? Can you have any use of this kind of data and information on the process of the development of talent? Hans, can you give me a bit more?
First of all, Ricardo, I like it when you don't follow the script, but that's a personal thing. No, on that one, it's clear that data is getting more and more important for us in talent development. There is not so much data from the Instats, Y-Scouts, etc. So only on the older age groups. So meaning that you have to create your own data and make your own data as a club, create them for the players that you have and the players that you want to recruit, so that you can set up benchmarks and then link them with the data from players in the first team when they were in the academy, and then based on the positions and all that. So you can use them in that way. And like I said, it's becoming more and more important to benchmark, but it's always supporting in our mind. So meaning that certainly on academy level, data should not be only leading and everything should be decided, and all decision-making processes should be only being made based on data. No, it should be supportive, and then people should make decisions about which player recruiting, which not, which to let free, etc. Is that a little bit an answer?
Hans, I heard that StatSports was doing well. The US Soccer Association was like doing a major effort in the US to collect as many data as possible of all the young players using StatSports system. Do you think that it might help to predict the talents? Having all of those data and all of those information about the evaluation, the involvement of the player. Do you believe that that might help, or it's only one more tool in the case of tools that we have at our disposal, Hans?
We come from a time, and when I look to my colleagues, we come from a time that we saw something only with our eyes and we were judging based on our experience, and we know. Now we are at a time that there are, like you're saying, there are data and facts, and the more data there are, the better the judgments and the decisions will be when they are used in the right way. So again, on your answer, also for younger age groups, in our opinion, the more data you can have from StatsBombs or from all these parties, or like I was saying, create your own data platform and create your own data and benchmarking within your academy and within your club. Yeah, the percentage of right decisions will be of course higher. So yeah, of course.
Okay, in my opinion. Thank you very much. Going back to you, Richard, and Jose already touched this point. This has to be with how important is not only to select a good player, but to select a player that fits the team, you know. And with your experience in Japan, I believe the cultural aspects are very important. I believe that it's not as important to select a good player, but also to think how will he fit the team, not only at the technical and tactical aspect, but also at the mental aspect. What do you think about these subjects, Richard?
Yeah, no, I would say, yes, certainly in Japan, one of the things that I found is much more about the team than about the individual. They struggle actually with that individualism. And although I understand the merits of the team, they often have to buy players in to be able to provide them with more creativity or people that they would deem to be selfish. And then you have to try and fit that kind of concept into their kind of more team culture, which is everything. You know, it's all about the team, and people try not to stand out. You know, the assist is more important than the goal. I think that in terms of selection at the top end, then yes, of course, you're trying to find players that, and I mentioned it before, fit into your culture of your club, but also fit into the playing style that you might have. So if you're going to play a really high pressing game and you've got wing backs and you're playing a back three, well, your wing backs need to have certain characteristics. I think for younger players, there's a danger that we go too early positionally. And I'm not sure that, you know, a player is going to play in that position, even when they're 16, 17. My experience is that players will often change positions. You know, wingers will become fullbacks, central midfield players will become central backs. So I think we have to be careful that we don't try to get them positionally too early. But within first team, I guess I used to see very much when I worked in a club situation, those clubs that had players that had more adaptability. So they weren't just one positional player, that they could play multiple positions. My club, we had one per position. So we needed almost two players in the squad to cover those. You played Manchester United and every player could play two or three positions, which was interesting. They were good football players, but they were adaptable. But ultimately, they also fitted in with the structure of the team, the philosophy of the team, and the behaviours of the team. And I think the best teams are those teams that have that combination of the group and understanding it's a team sport, but then individuals within that. And if you look at the best players in the world, they're often described, and I think wrongly, as kind of mavericks. I used to say that to one of my head coaches, and he'd always say, "What is a maverick? You know, tell me what that really means." And it's really hard to explain. And actually, those players that you might see as being a bit different are really good team players. They work really hard, they train really hard, but they are a bit different, you know, and that's what brings the qualities that they have and the differences that they might bring to the game. And you need those players in top teams. What you don't need is players that will come in who unfortunately aren't able to deliver at that high level, but cause problems within your squad. And I certainly know at international level, having worked with national teams, is, you know, decisions are made on players going to World Cups, and people are not included in squads, not because they're not good enough as players, because you have to think about who you're going to spend the next 6-8 weeks with and the impact they have on your team. So their behaviors and characteristics, if they don't fit in with the overall way you want to operate your team, might lead to disharmony and problems in the dressing room and cliques and all those sorts of things, which as a head of coach, you don't really want. So you obviously have to, you know, think on one hand, yeah, we want our best players there that are going to give us the best opportunity of winning our games. But on the other hand, how are they going to interact with the rest? Are they going to get the best out of their teammates? When it gets really hard, are they going to be good? If they're going to be put on the bench, we used to call them good tourists. You know, are they going to be able to come along on the trip? Some players go to a World Cup and never play, never get on the pitch. You know, how do they react? Are they going to become a problem, or are they going to fit in nicely? So I think, yes, I think you're right. I think that cultural fit is really, really important, and getting the balance is key.
Thank you very much, Richard. Back to you, Hans. I'm aware that you guys at Double Pass work with many top clubs from Europe and other countries, I'm sure. How talent ID can be a long-term investment? Do you feel that the clubs already understand that as an investment, and how it should be fitted on the overall strategy of those clubs? Do you feel that the clubs are now conscious that they should invest and in identification of talents, not only to integrate the team, but to generate some overheads and some money out of it, Hans?
Okay, thank you, Ricardo. On that one, it's clear that there was a mind shift, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago in a lot of countries in Europe, and you take the biggest one in England and in Germany, etc., to start investing in academies and in talent development systems and getting young guys and young players out of their own environment into their first team, and that they see also now which big market and the return on investment and the productivity, etc. So I think in Europe, in a lot of countries, that we are very clear that there is a lot going on. When you go into more second tier countries in Europe or worldwide, you see that there is still a big gap, that you have sometimes a real clear playing philosophy, coaching staff, etc., but there is no recruitment. Somebody is doing it a little bit, or players are coming in, and there is not really a talent idea recruitment department. So the first thing would be, when you talk about strategic decisions in your club and you don't have these things in place, please build it and invest, not maybe the total same amount, but invest some amount in a department for that, because all the money is going to coaches or to players, and not really to scouts or to head of scouting, etc. That's just a little thing that people are doing besides. So that's the first thing. And to align between first team, academy, and internal scouting and external scouting, to try to there should be some tensions between coaches and scouts, etc. Tensions, I mean, there should be discussions, but it's very important that you have to try to align these things. And then maybe on a strategic level, first as a club, start to know what you want to do. What is our talent business model? What do we want to do? Is it just by luck? Is it buying players? Is it bringing from the academy? Is it putting on loan? Is it a mix of things? Your talent business model, define it. Then design clear player pathways. What are the possibilities for players in our club to come into the first team? And then add your strategic squad planning to that. In our first team, our squad is looking like this, and this is what possibilities we have to bring in young players. Our second team could be like this, and the 19 team could be like this. So these are steps for us. Your talent development department, to structure it, to invest it, to make it aligned as possible with the other departments in and outside the club. That's one. And then secondly, on a strategic level, be clear about your talent business model, define as good as possible some player pathways, and work out your strategic squad planning. Is that an answer? Please.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Hans. Jose, we talked about data, and of course there is some technology on collecting that data, of course, but are you aware of any other technology that is being used for Talent ID? Can you show us some of that technology and the purpose of that technology, Jose?
Well, first of all, at this level, Talent ID, I would say like under 17, for instance. Let's put a number here. The pool of data is not so big, not so huge. So it's kind of restrictive. It's it's hard to say this like this globally Talent ID technology. Okay, what happens now? It's the metrics are getting more and more advanced. So the data providers are willing and actually getting to build predictive models, more complex models, and this is eventually like an automated tool, okay, but in the end you always will need the human presence, the quality approach, because the data, as I told you before, for me I see it as an expertise. Okay, now you have this very common now, you have these companies, data providers, asking questions, okay, let's try to find the replacement for Leo Messi, for example, for Neymar, for Mbappe, and they look at the data and they try to build a model to get to the similar players. But this is only data. You have to be cautious with limitations for this type of approach. First of all, because data is pretty much based on actions and not in behaviors. For instance, and I always like to give examples. You look at it as a striker. Okay, one of the issues, obviously, you have to access, to evaluate, is off the ball movements. Where is the data about it? It's how can you really decode the way these behaviors he gets to good finishing positions? Okay, one thing is, okay, this guy is a good finisher, like proportional. This is okay, he's expected goal, whatever, but his behavior until he gets to the position is not the same as data going to show you. It's not going to happen. And also, all the data is contextual. I have to be careful because even the actions of any player may be biased, conditioned and because of the tactical approach of the team. It's about also the quality of the colleagues and teammates and the opponents and the pitch, whatever. So I know we're talking about trends and patterns, and we try to gather always the bigger amount of minutes as possible. Okay, but in the end, there are limitations. We have to be careful. So the human factor in this process for me is always is going to always play a key role. It's you cannot do it without human presence. It's not like about machine learning or other things that the computer going to tell you is going to be the next level Messi. It's going to happen. I don't think so.
Okay, Jose, thank you very much. So now going to talk a bit more about talent development. And this question is for Richard. Richard, do you feel that early sports specialization is counterproductive for football? I can see that many clubs are now, even in Portugal, taking the kids and play other sports. Do you believe that having that specialization early is counterproductive for the development in football? What do you think about this subject, Richard?
I think yes. I mean, I could just leave it at that. Yes, it is. No, I am of a belief that early specialization in any sport, I can understand maybe there are some sports that you need to start very young because you finish very young, but generally speaking, I think it's problematic. I think all the research would say that it leads to injury, it leads to psychological stress, and actually it leads to inactivity later on, because only a small proportion of players will actually make it through any system. And if they haven't got any more things to do, they just don't do anything. So they'll finish playing football and they don't do anything else. I came from an era where I would have gone to school and played every sport. And therefore, even if I'm not playing football, I'd probably go and play tennis, or I'd go and do something else. If I'd only played one sport and I finished with that sport through injury, through just wanting to do something different, I probably wouldn't have had anything else to fall back on. So I think, there's some strong evidence to suggest that it's detrimental in terms of athletic development because you're doing the same movement patterns. And I just think it's good to do something else, and I know that there are clubs, Ajax introduced judo and other clubs were doing other different sports. I do believe that if it's just football, it's problematic. In England, where you have boys going into academies at 9 years old as their first age group. We were very clear at Tottenham, for example, and at Queen's Park Rangers when I worked there, that foundation phase, it couldn't be that serious. We had to make it fun. Yes, we wanted to learn some of the fundamentals, but, parents and players got carried away saying, well, this is the only thing I can do. I can only play football. I can't do this at school. I can't do that. That's different sport. And we encourage them to do it. Back in the old days, English football players played football in the winter and played cricket in the summer, and they were professional in both sports. Now I know those times have gone, and I know that there is a point in time, maybe when you come into the club full time almost, where you have to take it more seriously, and you probably don't have time to do it. But I'd even argue with professional players at the top end. How many of them play golf? How many of them play other sports? Because you need a psychological release, let alone just thinking about your one sport, because the pressure is so high. So no, I believe in a multi-sport environment. yes, I understand that you want to become really good at football, but I think you need to get a right balance. And I think balance is always the key. And it is very dependent upon the age, phase, and stage of development as to how much. And we had battles. Hans will be aware of EPPP being introduced, and I was certainly at the forefront of Tottenham Hotspur on pushing back on the required hours for players. We have this thing around. Ericsson says 10,000 hours and we're all going to be elite players. Well, actually, it doesn't quite work like that. And we have to be very, very careful about how we develop players, because somebody might do it in 2,000 hours and some might be on 20,000 hours and they still haven't got there. So I think we just need to be very, very careful and understand that every player's journey is different. It's not linear in terms of development. And so therefore, it's really hard. And that's the whole data question. I think data with younger players can be dangerous. If we had decided not to have signed Harry Kane at Spurs because his physical data was so poor, we would have missed out on one of the best players in the world. Making decisions on physical data before they go through puberty is a mistake. Yes, maybe through their individual development plans and their review processes, put markers in and analytics to look at that, because I think reviewing your performance is really, really good. Anyway, I'm going off topic, but yeah, I think early specialization is not something that I feel is really good for player development.
Thanks a lot, Richard. Hans, back to you. I believe that this issue is inserted in your plan of development talent in Double Pass. But could you please explain the different steps that you take on that process of development talent, and what is the model of Double Pass in what concerns to this subject, Hans?
Yeah.
Just in 3 or 4 minutes.
Yes, sorry. Are you talking, Ricardo, about developing talent, or are you talking about the talent identification?
Developing the talent.
Developing the talent. Okay. First of all, what we are doing within our framework, we have a total framework and a club model, how to inspire a club, but also federations. Not to come somewhere and to say this is how you should do it, but to try to inspire them and to structure. Starting with what Richard was saying, starting with being really clear on the club DNA, the style of play, going into designing game phases, designing principles, game situations, going to player profiles. So the whole thing, what we call about the game model or the football philosophy. That's really important to have it clearly in your club, in your academy. And if possible, to try to link it between first team environment and academy, but also that it's really in some environments it's really difficult depending on the profile of the first team head coach. That's one step. Then it's the next one is to design a clear curriculum and putting into a prioritization plan. Okay, how are we now gonna put that football philosophy into practice for players? That's a second step, with all the different age groups and all the accents that you are putting on which age groups and what you want. That's the second one. And then thirdly, to have a clear eye on individual development with all the IDP, the IAPs, putting that into practice and make it really happen. Because we see a lot of clubs where they are really good on paper, but I will not say it like this, but not so good on the pitch. And sometimes inverse, that we see really good things on the pitch, but they have no structure at all. So it's really important to combine these things and be really organized, structured, and having all these things in place. And then secondly, also for the coaches to translate it for the players into the pitch. And then the last phase in this project, in this development throughout the age groups, is then a clear eye for the transition into first team and professional football, because that's with transition coaches, with transition protocol, things like that. To put emphasis on that and with integration processes also into first team environment, because that's another thing that we see a lot. A lot of things are there in academy, and then, okay, a player is ready, boom, they give him to first team environment, and the job of academy is done. They don't have anything to say anymore, and then it's in first team environment, and then stupid things are happening. So it's within the talent ID, within development, it's a total process, of course, everybody's aware of that. And these are steps for us. Being clear about playing philosophy, putting into curriculum periodization with an eye on individual development, and then transition to first team. 3 minutes, Mr. Ricardo, I hope.
Perfect. Our time is up. I would like to thank Hans, Jose, and Richard for this lovely conversation. I hope that our attendees can take something that they can use to build their own talent identification process. Of course, with this such experienced professionals in this area, it would be much easier. But once again, thank you for sharing, Hans, Jose, Richard, and back to you now, Solveig.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. It was such an insightful session. Thank you to all our panelists, Richard, Jose, and Hans. Thank you so much. I have certainly learned something about talent identification, scouting, and development today. And I'm sure people watching this have learned a lot of things from this as well. Thank you so much.